but you need to press on. You need to keep going. You need to dig deep in those times. Establish who you are as a person, develop these habits, and when times become tough or you plateau on your goals or whatever you're doing, you have to remember what got you started in the first place. BBL Drizzy, BBL Drizzy, coming to you live from the Pattern Studio. I am in a new place, guys. I'm in an actual studio. This is the first time. So Pattern, this isn't a secret anymore, but I work for Pattern. We're an e-commerce accelerator. And I talked with John LeBaron here about this and talked to a few other people in the marketing room. They said I could use their studio. So guess what, guys? Until I'm told not to, I'm going to start recording here. So things are a little bit better, hopefully. Lighting's obviously better. You can see if you're looking at this. If you're listening, hopefully it sounds better. I've got some nicer microphones. So I'm excited about this opportunity. And that's how I'm looking at it. This is an opportunity for me to connect with you guys and for you to get to know me better, for me to sound better, and obviously work on myself. So I'm excited. I think this will be a good opportunity, like I said, and we're going to jump into things today. But I want to start off with a sad story. Not necessarily that sad, but sad for me. And what I mean by that is I kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. I've talked so many times on this podcast about the importance of consistency, staying motivated, taking care of yourself, eating right, exercising, all these things I preach about. And unfortunately, I kind of let that take a back seat since Allie left. She went to train, for those that are following along, she's training right now to become a pilot for Allegiant. When she left for her initial training to get her ATP rating in Dallas, she left in March. And since then, we've been doing the long distance thing. It's not really the best, to be honest. It kind of sucks, but that's okay. Like, she's progressing. She's doing some really big things. I'm super proud of her for the things she's trying to accomplish and for putting herself out there. And when she left, though, I felt that there was like a hole that I was missing. As silly as it sounds, it really did feel like my better half left me. And because of that, I almost figured out how I needed to live again. As weird as that sounds, because I got so accustomed to doing life with Allie while she's here in Utah and just living together, coming home, she's there. But now it's like I come home, she's not there. And I wake up, she's not in my bed. It's really sad. And all these little things just kind of piled up, compounded, and I fell off the train. I let myself take it easy for a little bit. And it didn't take long. You could see that in my training. Like, my coach even texted me a few times and was like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, you're not hitting your mileage. Are you fatigued? What's going on?" And that pretty much was a catalyst for her saying, "No, okay, we're going to take an easy week." And that was last week. So last week, I wasn't training too much. And during that time, I was like, what's going on with me? Like, am I just being a little baby? Like, what's going on? How come I can't train? How come I can't wake up and go to the gym? What's going on with me? But I realized it was because I stopped doing the small things. And what I mean by that is, like, I stopped putting my workout clothes out the night before, and which was always like a trigger for me in the morning to just wake up and go put it on, and boom, I was up. But now it's like I have to go back and think about that, right? And so a lot of these different small things that I used to do that were part of my routine, like stretching was. And so because I didn't stretch every single night, my body was tighter than it used to be, what's the term there? You know what I'm trying to say though, right? My body is tighter than it usually is. There you go. And because of that, it makes it harder to train. If your body is fit, if it's feeling good, if you're fueling it right, then by all means, you're going to be fine. The thing is, though, is I was not feeling right. And I actually gained about 10 pounds since Allie's left. Allie, come back. I'm getting fat. And it's because I just let things happen, right? I wasn't planning out my meals. I was just kind of figuring out, like, when I'd come home, be like, okay, what am I going to make tonight? But usually when Allie's here, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make this for us. I'm going to wake up. I want to be a good example to her. So I'm going to wake up and go work out and all these things, right? And like, I want to make her proud. And when she's there by my side, it's a lot easier. But the thing I realized last week was, you know what? No matter what, if she's here or not, I still want to make her proud. And no matter what, if I'm sitting in bed or working out, like, I know which one would make her proud. And it's not to say that she wouldn't be proud of me if I stayed in bed or anything like that. She just knows that it's a lot of work and it's hard and it's effort. And she sees that example when I'm with her. And I want her to know that when she's gone, I'm still doing the same things. And I don't know where I came up to this realization, but it hit me pretty hard last week. So that's why I've been a little bit more focused on just kind of staying consistent and staying consistent with the small things, which is kind of the topic of this episode today. Is how do you remain motivated? How do you stay consistent when those days are hard, or when you have big life changes, like when Allie left me? Like, what do you do in those situations? Because no one really talks about it, right? It's like they'll talk about what you should be doing with your life, the habits to do it. But once you get to that point and you're starting to exercise new habits, you're starting to try new things, motivation's going to die at some point. And you have to have a strong enough why to keep you going on the days that motivation is zero. Because if you don't have a strong enough why, then what's going to keep you going? You have to be bought into your own decision. You have to be bought into your goals. If you're bought into the things that you're doing, you're going to have skin in the game. You're going to want to push yourself. You're going to want to do better. And ultimately, it came down to my priorities, thinking about where I could work better. And my priorities were pretty simple. And I just had to rework my schedule a little bit and reintroduce those things in my life. And it's only been a week. And my quote unquote falling off the train wasn't necessarily that long of a period, right? I just kind of got lazy for a little bit. But what do you do? What do you do to reignite that fire? And I want to introduce everyone to a concept I learned on Joe Rogan's podcast. He talks about letting the general talk. And it's interesting. It's an interesting concept because the general to Joe Rogan is the little guy in your head that, you know what? It doesn't matter how you're feeling. That general is going to tell you what you're doing. So for him, he gives the example of whenever he goes in the ice bath, he absolutely hates it. But that general kicks in and says, hey, no, get your ass in the cold tub there. Like, you're going, so do it. And when I was thinking about myself, I've talked a lot on this podcast about how I used to really be negative on myself. I used to beat myself up all the time. And what I realized what that was the general all the time in my head, telling me what to do, beating myself into like pretty much a pulp to where I was so tired from work, from working out, from trying to network and build relationships with other people, including Allie. And it was just tough. Like having the general talk all the time, I don't think is beneficial. That's coming from firsthand experience. I could be wrong on that, but from what I saw, when I let the general just control my life, it was very hard to be balanced in the other areas of my life that were important. So when I would go work out super hard, I'd go to work and work all day. I'd come home and have no energy to give to the people that I love. And so when I started dating Allie, she helped me a lot with the negative self-talk. But I'd be lying to you if I said that the general doesn't make an appearance every once in a while. In fact, I need the general to show up. And I think the same thing goes for you. Like, you need the general to show up and tell you what to do on those days when you don't want to. Because on those days when I wanted to stay in bed and I wanted to be lazy, no, I needed the general to say, wake up, Brett, like get up. This is what you're doing. Because the days I realize that there's a significant difference in my anxiety levels and how I feel throughout the day if I don't work out in the morning. As weird as it sounds, that's my routine. That's what I do. And there's a significant difference in my day when I don't do that first thing in the morning. That might not be the case for you. You might have your own thing. You might have to figure out what time of day it is that you're doing physical activity. And it's just understanding that sometimes it's going to be difficult to keep that going. That's when you need to let the general talk. Everyone has that voice in their head. I firmly believe it. Of the voice that when you're given a dilemma, you should always choose the more difficult thing that you're telling yourself you shouldn't be doing, right? So let me give you an example. It's late at night, you're driving home from work, and you really want a burger. You really want one. You've eaten decent all day, and you're like, I know that would put me over the edge. For my calorie goal, I probably could be putting better food into my body than a burger, but it sounds so good. And that general kicks in and says, no, you know what you should be eating. Go home, eat some Whole Foods, whatever. Don't cave. Don't get the burger. That general is kicking in, right? But you're telling yourself, no, that burger still sounds so good. And so you're given a choice. One, you know what's better, what you need to do for your body to feel healthy and strong. Or two, you're going to give in to the temporary mouth pleasure and cave, go get that burger. Like one or the other. One, the pleasure will last for 30 seconds. Two, you will be disciplined and you will probably feel better. Yes, you might have to make a meal. It might take a little bit more time, but choose your heart. The heart of feeling bad or the heart of being a little bit more disciplined, giving up and sacrificing the taste for the burger for a little bit of a healthier option. Now, I understand I'm just trying to be general here, but Aristotle says it best. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit, which brings me to my first point of the power of daily habits. So for me, in the example of Allie leaving me, I had to figure out what habits were missing from my life and what bad habits I started reintroducing. I reintroduced eating a lot, and I've talked about Fat Brett. Fat Brett's in there. The general controls Fat Brett. Otherwise, Fat Brett, that's a loud voice, and he'd want to go and get that cheesy gordita crunch anytime. So I don't do that. But the thing is what habits were missing from my life? Okay, it was working out in the morning. I would go to work and then work out at night. And because of that, I don't know, my workouts weren't the best and I wasn't focused. In the morning, it's a different feeling. So that was the first thing that was missing. Second thing that was missing, my actual workouts themselves. I was not being as strong and focused and intentional as I should be with my workouts. I was just training to train and wasn't really working on my goals, focusing on my goals. But I realized pretty quickly, if I don't change that, I'm going to be in a lot of pain a month from today on barriers if I'm not preparing as I should be for this ultra marathon. So I re-engaged in that. I brought back reading and trying to learn and eating better foods, making those meals, making my famous garbage bowl, all those things that I like to do. So the point I'm trying to make here is I just had to go back and reevaluate. And that's the power of journaling. I talk about it all the time, but there's a reason I do. It's because there actually is power in it. And so when you think about journaling, it's just like you are documenting your experience. You are trying to see what you're doing and where you can improve, right? In my head, a journal should be a living document of your life. I'm so proud of what I have in my journal because pretty much it is a document of my life. I could go give it to someone and they could write a screenplay about Brett if they wanted to. I'm not saying it would be an exciting movie, but I'm proud that I can do that. I'm proud that I have all this history. So when my kids, are like, hey, what was going through Brett's head? What's going through Dad's head? If they call me Brett, I'll be upset. So future kids, if you're listening to this, please call me Dad. But I Just think it's important. So don't know where I was going with that. But anyways, daily habits are very important. So journaling, at least gives you an idea of where you're at in your head. But there is something that I want to introduce called habit stacking. I haven't talked about this on this podcast, but habit stacking, I learned this for myself. I'm going to read this. Habit stacking is a really effective strategy for building new habits because it builds off of existing neural networks in our brains. And this is coming from a psychologist named Melissa Ming. She's a PhD, so she's talking about it. Anyways, when you identify a daily action or a habit you already engage in, try adding a new habit or make a change before or after the existing habit. Rather than strengthening an entirely new neural network, you're capitalizing on a structure and cycle that already exists in your brain. So a good example that she gave was if you wanted to drink water in the morning, then a good cue could be after you brush your teeth, you drink a glass of water, just so you get that habit going. But you build upon existing habits so that when you start reintroducing new ones, or start trying to build on new ones, or start decreasing bad habits, then it makes it a little easier because that becomes a trigger. And I'll give you an example of this. I actually talked to Allie about it. She was saying, she's like, Brett, you got to start getting more people on the podcast. And I was like, you're right, I do. And so I created a spreadsheet with like all these contacts, all these different people that I would want to have on the podcast, how I'm reaching out to them, I'm tracking it. It's pretty much how I do my sales process. But I was like, why don't I do that with podcasting? And so I built the sheet and it kind of sat there for a couple of days. And Allie was like, hey, how's it going? How's the progress of reaching out to people? How's that been? And so I was like, honestly, not that great. She's like, you got to do it. You got to stay consistent. Just do one a day. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm just being lazy. And she's like, just do it when you're doing your morning gratitude journal. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad call. And so now my habit is I wake up, I come to work. The first thing I do at work is just write 3 things that I'm grateful for. That's either before I get to work or like as soon as I do. I just write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. Starts my day right. I like doing that. And so now I build upon that habit by I write 3 things I'm grateful for, and then I reach out to one person to be on my podcast. It's been working, but that's habit stacking. And you're going to want to remember that as you build new habits, it's important to track it because tracking shows consistency. It shows progress. And the only way that you can be successful at a habit or introducing a new habit is through consistency. I've talked about how discipline and consistency are the 2 main factors that will get you anywhere in life. I firmly believe that. Discipline is the catalyst that will get you on the process of your goal. It will get you started on your goal. But consistency is what gets you across the finish line. If you're not consistent, you won't be successful. There's a quote from Chris Williamson that says, I can't guarantee that you will be successful if you're consistent, but I can guarantee you won't be successful if you are not consistent. Pretty self-explanatory. If you're not consistently showing up, if you're not showing up every day, giving your best work, giving your best effort at whatever you're doing, then what's going to happen? You're going to fall off. That's it. If you look at every single successful person in their given realm, it could be sports, it could be business, it could be spiritual, whatever you want to say. If any of these people who are successful in their work, a common trait with all of them is that they are disciplined people and they are consistent. Discipline, maybe not so much. There are some pretty wild people. No, I'm gonna backtrack on that one. I do believe that every successful person has to be disciplined and consistent. That's really it. With running, if you're not consistent, you're not going to be a good runner. And you have to have the discipline to start the runs. Because how many freaking times have I said that I just don't want to do it sometimes? And it's hard. I understand that. It is very difficult. But if you have discipline, you could do it. It just takes a little bit of focus and effort. So what can you be more focused and put more effort into? Now, there's this term that's thrown out there a lot, which is system, right? You have to have systems in your life to kind of help maintain flexibility and maintain your course, right? But a system, the whole point of a system in anything, if it's a machine, if it's a system that you've built yourself, or if it's a personal system that you have for whatever, systems are made to make things easy. And you have to build environmental systems. What I mean by that is, there's this quote from Shannon Alder. She says, the system is not something you are doing, but something you are becoming. And so you're building this system, right? The system of, whatever you want to focus on. But I want to go back to talking about habit stacking, because the psychologist, Melissa Ming, she also said this, which I thought was really interesting. And she said, research shows that consistency of practice is more effective than duration of practice in helping us make changes in our lives. Ming says, doing something every day for 5 minutes is more likely to result in sustainable change than practicing something once a week for 30 minutes. On that note, I want to talk about that same thing. Doing something every day for 5 minutes is more likely to result in sustainable change than practicing something once a week for 30 minutes. Now, why is that important? A good example is circling back to when I was talking about me falling off. It was not like up until that point, I was running 50-mile weeks, right? And I was really showing up. I was doing well. The next week, I dropped to about a 42-mile week. And then the week after that was about 26 miles. And that was the easier week. But, it's reintroducing that, getting back onto that 50-mile mark. It was just doing an extra mile every day, and you have to reintroduce the slow, but it's not like the point is, and I think what Dr. Ming is trying to say and what I'm trying to say is that by doing a small thing every day until you get the hang of it, it's going to be the catalyst to drive you to make those bigger changes. I always talk about how when I first began running, I wasn't putting in 20-mile runs. I wasn't doing that. I wasn't putting in 50-mile weeks. And I had an 11-minute pace. I told that story not too long ago, so I won't harp on it too much here. But I had an 11-minute pace. That's not what it is now. But it's because I've had so much consistent work to get to the point to where now my average pace is about 7:30 on a good day, maybe 7. And I'm proud of that. I'm not going to go flaunt it, but I know how much work went into that. And so if people make fun of me for running, I'm like, great, make fun of me all you want. Call me whatever you want. I know running is looked down upon by some people. You're doing too much cardio or whatever, but you can't tell me to not be proud of that work. It's long, long hours. This year alone, I've ran 774 miles. I almost said 774,000 miles. That would have been an insane amount. But anyways, 774 miles this year. If you would have told me that 2 years ago, I would have laughed in your face and said, no way. By May 23rd of 2024, like having a gear just to run 747 miles, I would have laughed. No way. But that's the importance of being able to stay consistent. And that's the power of consistency. Consistency compounds. And so when you do lose that motivation, one thing you can rely on is the habit that you built of consistency. And so you'll be like, hey, you know what? I know I've done this before. I can do it again. That's a thought that goes through my head all the time. When I get up and I have to go do a 10-mile run, a lot of the times I'm not excited until I get there. And then I'm like, hey, you know what? I've done this before. I can do it again. Guess what? Usually that's the case. I could do it again. And another thing that I want to talk about is just motivation itself. Jim Rohn, I think he's like a self-help dude, but he has this really good quote. He says, motivation is what gets you started, and habit is what keeps you going. which in a sense you could also say is the same thing as discipline is the catalyst that gets you going on your goal, while consistency is what gets you across the finish line. But motivation is going to die. And you need to be aware of that as you go into whatever goals you're trying to pursue, because otherwise it'll surprise you. When one day, you're feeling really good, the next day you're feeling great, you're really excited about this new thing that you're trying to pursue. And I've heard that before, is like new ideas get people excited until that new idea becomes a regular thing. And then it kind of loses its sexiness, right? But if you're consistent, if you just show up for 5 minutes a day, like Dr. Ming was talking about, and you just do that every day, that habit can turn into 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, depending on what it is. I don't know what goals you have, but realize that motivation is going to die, and know that that's a good sign, because that means you're making progress. That means, okay, the honeymoon phase of my goal is over. I'm not that excited. The New Year's resolution thing, like that's a good thing. That's a good example to go to. Lots of people make New Year's resolutions, but after January, 30th, January 18th, maybe, people start falling off. It's because they don't get excited about the newness of their goal anymore. That's why it's important to build consistency. And that's why you need to start slow, because otherwise burnout is a severe possibility. Now, when you find a plateau, think about this quote from Thomas Edison. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. That is a sad quote, because how many people have given up? I've given up so many times. And that's why I'm trying to push myself and test my limits, because that's a bad feeling. Giving up on a goal that you didn't see through. Now, it's a different story if you tried your very best and you worked very hard, but you couldn't accomplish that goal. Whole different story, whole different scenario. But if you're just giving up because you're tired of it, or you don't feel like you're making progress, oftentimes that's when you are. And you just have to hold true, and you have to be strong. And I learned this lesson from my wife, but visualization. A lot of people talk about it, like think about the dream house you want, the car you want, the life you want to live. That's all important, right? You should be thinking about your future in that sense. Like, hey, what is the next step for our family in terms of a house? Like, think about those kind of things. It's important. That should get you motivated too, but don't let that be your North Star. But what I'm talking about with visualization, there you go, is visualizing your success. So what would it look like for you if you were able to cross that finish line on your ultra marathon? For me, I think I'm going to be pretty proud of myself, and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Obviously that wasn't my limit. I can do more. I'm trying to find my limit, guys. That's what I want to do. The point of me trying to push myself as much as I am, run all these races, is to see what my limit is. So far, I haven't found it, but knock on wood there. I hope I don't regret saying that. I'm sure I will find it at some point. But think about your success. Think about you. If you're training for a race, on that race, how are you going to be? If you are trying to learn and you're trying to learn a new technique or learn a new skill, then think about you doing the skill, or just think about what you're trying to learn. If it's math, science, whatever, just always try and think about it. Because thinking about it puts it on top of your mind, which means it's going to hopefully drive you to take action, hopefully push you in the right direction, and get you excited about, continuing. But don't get so pigeonholed and focused on the visualization piece that you forget to take the action piece. Because then at that point, it becomes daydreaming, and it'll get you nowhere. It's a nice thing to do, but don't let it be the main thing in your life, taking over your life at least. But ruts happen to everyone. And that's why I wanted to make this episode is you should be proud when you find yourself in a rut, because that means you're doing things that other people aren't. But you need to press on. You need to keep going. You need to dig deep in those times. Establish who you are as a person. Develop these habits. And when times become tough or you plateau on your goals or whatever you're doing, you have to remember what got you started in the first place. And you have to think about the success that you will get at the end of that finish line. That's the thing, is who do you want to be? Do you want to be someone who people know as a go-getter, as someone who can attack goals, get things done? Or do you want to be someone who's just average? I don't think it's the latter. I would assume it's probably the first. And adversity is good. It's good because that means you're growing. Nick Bear says this: endurance is an outcome forged by those who are wise enough to endure the process. I love that quote. It's so good because when you think about it, endure the process. So when that process gets hard, are you able to endure it? It's going to show a lot about you. So that's the it. That's the it. That's the end of the podcast. But I appreciate everyone listening because, it's difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. It's difficult to keep all these things going. It's hard to stay on top of podcasting, my job, work, running, training, spending time with Allie and making sure she knows she's loved. It's hard balancing all this stuff. And I know for a fact that you have a similar situation going on. It could be a spouse. You could have kids. You could have a job too, and also be training for something. Point is, everyone has hard things happen in life. Everyone's life is not easy. We're not meant to come to this world and just kind of kick it on the beach. I've heard it said many times that you wouldn't want that because over time you get sick of it. And I want to leave everyone with this quote from James Clear, who is the master, I would say, of habits. His book, Atomic Habits, I was hyping it up on this last podcast I made a couple days ago. But this one, I think, is a good way to close out. So he says, in theory, consistency is about being disciplined, determined, and unwavering. In practice, consistency is about being adaptable. Don't have much time, scale it down. Don't have much energy, do the easy version. Find different ways to show up depending on the circumstances. Let your habits change shape to meet the demands of the day. Adaptability is the way of consistency. So when you go through a rut, adapt. I appreciate everyone for listening to this. If you ever want to be a guest, always feel free to shoot me a message. I'm an open guy. I'm not going to shoot you down, I want people to come on this. I want them to tell their stories. I want other people to know what's out there. So I appreciate everyone listening, though. If it was worth anything to you, please let me share some feedback with me, leave a review, whatever you want to do. So until next time, everyone, keep getting after it, keep kicking ass, and I'll talk to you soon.